We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, coming up in just a moment, the former Greater Manchester Police Detective Maggie Oliver on the announcement of a national inquiry into grooming gangs. But first, let's speak to Mari about all of the day's politics. Mari, you're fluent in French, aren't you?
I am.
What would you say if you were Prime Minister Starmer to President Macron this morning to try and calm the nerves over breakfast?
I would say, prends pas la tête.
Which means?
It means don't stress yourself out, don't overthink it, which I think is reasonable advice considering that Donald Trump likes to do things quite performatively. And he likes to play to his own domestic audience more so than anything else. So it's not always about you.
And this, of course, is in light of Donald Trump leaving the G7 early, taking a big swipe at President Macron over social media in doing so. And, of course, off the back of the one most significant bit of good news out of the G7 yesterday, which was very specific to two countries, to the UK and the US.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Keir Starmer, you know, despite the little fumble that was great reporting from Beth Rigby earlier, it's a way of him showing that he can get things done, get over the line, and actually work with different allies that might not always see eye to eye. For instance, you've seen how pally he is, not just with Trump, but also with Emmanuel Macron, who clearly at the moment aren't necessarily the best of friends. And also, I think it shows that actually Rachel Reeves has said again and again, Britain is back in business, which is back open for business. And it really does show that. We know that the Prime Minister wants to try and maybe get a trade deal with, for instance, Mark Carney and the Canadians. So actually kind of slightly dangling that in the Canadians' face on Canadian soil might just perhaps put a bit of a rocket booster up some of those ambitions as well.
Interestingly, someone pointed out that, of course, President Macron stopped off in Greenland for a show of support for them en route to Canada, which might have triggered the sort of annoyance from President Trump towards him, which I reference just because if it's not a spat specifically over Iran and Israel, maybe there's less consequences for the Middle East off the back of that particular tweet. Now, the agenda, of course, is still full today in the G7, even though the president's not there, which includes quite a lot of media and I guess Prime Minister Starmer will want to talk about that trade deal, but probably won't be asked about it.
Yeah, realistically, domestic issues are massively overshadowing a lot of these international discussions at the moment. You know, the G7 being overshadowed not just by the Middle East, but also by, for instance, discussions on grooming gangs. And Kemi Badenoch is giving a press conference at about 11 o'clock this morning about that. We've had one of the victims of the grooming gangs speak to a newspaper this morning saying she thinks the Prime Minister should resign. So even though the government wants to try and move the agenda on, they want to talk about steel, they want to talk about the trade deal, they want to maybe even talk about the abortion vote, but the grooming gangs is that kind of lingering topic that isn't going away and is something that has a lot of public interest as well, which is why.
Well, that's going to be our next topic of discussion. We're going to discuss it with Maggie Oliver, the former detective constable. But it's 8:30, so let's remind you of today's top stories. First of all, well, the US President Donald Trump has left the G7 summit early. Journalists had been briefed by the French President Emmanuel Macron that he was returning to Washington to deal with the crisis in the Middle East, only to be publicly corrected. President Trump said Emmanuel always gets it wrong and he's working on something